We are live! Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn with our in-house studio audience and our virtual studio audience. It is wonderful to see so many of you. It's the millions tuning in. Nearly millions. I think we're on 999,999 tuned in at the moment on YouTube. Great to have you all on board. So, as we always do, let's have a look at the weekly Torah portion, and then we are hopefully going to reach the end of those 48 traits, goals, targets that we have been talking about now for a significant number of weeks. But here's the exciting thing. I think that we can complete Pirkei Avot, finish the whole thing by the summer. How is that for a target? I say we try and aim to have a big, grand end-of-year bash and then go into the summer holidays and come back again next September, rejuvenated and with a new program. Wow, those kids are really loud. They are really loud. Anyway, so Parashat Korach, guys, is this week. And Parashat Korach is a very famous story. And it's all about Moshe's first cousin. And there's loads to say, but let's summarize the narrative and say as follows, that Korach assembled a whole group of people to challenge the leadership of Moses and Aharon. Hi, Gary. And it does not end well. Famously, the ground swallows them up. Do we recall this story in the Torah? So he's got a whole entourage of more than 250 people challenging the fact that Moses and Aaron hold the key leadership positions amongst the Jewish people, and they challenge this. And in the end, Hashem shows who is in charge, and Korach is dispelled with, and his entourage is dispelled with, and as a result of that, we come out firmly understanding that Moshe should be leading the Jewish people, that Aaron should be the Kohen Gadol, and that briefly summarizes the episode. We might remember from chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot that the Mishnah over there asked, well, it didn't ask, it told us that any machloket, any disagreement, any dispute, which is l'shem shemayim, which is with lofty goals in mind of bringing about more awareness of God in the world. So any argument that takes place for the sake of God is going to endure. And any argument that is not for the sake of God is not going to endure. And the Mishnah asks, well, can you give me some examples of what we're talking about over here? And the Mishnah says, well, in the example of a machloket l'shem shemayim, of a dispute, of a disagreement which has the right intentions in mind, the prototype, the example that it gives is Hillel and Shammai. Because Hillel and Shammai were two individuals who were constantly at loggerheads with each other, but it was in order to delve and reveal what the emet, what the truth should be. Not only that, but despite the fact that they were constantly disagreeing over how to interpret things in the Torah, nonetheless, they had immense amounts of respect for each other, and so much so that their daughters and their sons used to marry each other. So it was not that they were having a broigus. They disagreed on an intellectual level, I guess, on a cerebral level. I never know how to use the word cerebral, but I've always wanted to, and I think that fits. Thank you very much. One of these days I'll be educated. So it didn't stop them from interacting, from respecting, from loving one another. They were just trying to delve into what the truth and what the word of Hashem was supposed to be. The example that the Mishnah gives of a machloket that was not l'shem shemayim, which had the wrong intentions, was Korach v'kol adato. It says Korach and his entourage. And it's interesting because on the one hand, for the right reasons, the example that we have is Hillel on one side and Shammai on the other side. But when it comes to the example of a wrong disagreement, the example that it brings is Korach and his entourage. It doesn't say Korach and Moshe. Isn't that intriguing? Did you ever think about this, Gary? It doesn't. I didn't think about this back on chapter 5. Right? It doesn't tell us that it was Korach on one side and Moshe on the other side. It says Korach and his entourage. They were on the same side, and therein lies the secret of a battle fought for the sake of heaven and a battle fought that's not for the sake of heaven. They would have picked a fight with anybody. It's just that Moshe was in the crosshairs at the time. A machloket l'shem shemayim doesn't necessarily have to have rhyme or reason. It can just be this individual against the whole world. Whoever it is that's in the crosshairs at the time, that's who they're picking the machloket with. That's who they're picking the argument with. And that really resonates in this day and age, because you often find that that the eruption of argument that takes place is not necessarily for the right reasons. It's just whoever happened to be caught up in it at the time. And it's interesting as well because the verses teach us that Korach and his followers gathered around Moshe and Aaron. And there was a beautiful insight into this fact, the fact that when the argument came, it came as Korach and the entourage swarming around Moses and Aaron. They did it deliberately in public. They didn't take about the leadership, that it was wrong that two brothers should have all of this power. And, Korach's also an important person, and maybe one of the positions should have gone to him and not just to two brothers from the same Levite lineage. Spread the love a little bit. Let Korach also have some. He's also an impressive guy. So that seems to have been the root of their discontent.
But was Moshe appointed by God, or was it heritage that he?
So Moses was appointed at the time of the burning bush, essentially, and Aaron was appointed later in time as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. But this is what Korach was challenging, and so the demonstration had to be a clear indication that this is who Hashem has chosen. So there were all kinds of miracles that took place to show that Hashem really meant business. You can go through the parasha and you can check it out when you're in shul on Shabbos morning listening to. So what was I saying? So they did it very publicly. They didn't start off by going to Moses, taking him aside and like, can I ask you a little question here, Moses? I mean, why is it that you got all the positions? Maybe I could also come along and do something. I'm always here to help. He didn't do that. He got over 250 people together. They marched through the camp, beeline straight for Moses, and made this whole public spectacle to challenge him in public. And that as well helps us to understand what a machloket that's not l'shem shemayim can look like, that's not for the right intentions. And when we consider how public arguments can get nowadays, this should also resonate with us a bit as well. All it takes is, you go into a restaurant, something goes wrong, and before you know it, it's plastered all over social media. Oh, this is what the waitress did to me when I was in the restaurant. We should boycott the restaurant or go again. If you've got beef, if you've got problem, go to the manager and discuss it. But everything in this generation, so often we find that it's just thrown out there. It's put all over social media. Everyone has to know about every little grievance that we have had. And you could argue that is not l'shem shemayim. That doesn't bring holiness and sanctity into the world. It creates Controversy creates factions, it creates disagreement, it creates rifts in society. So we're still struggling with this. David.
Just wondered, you mentioned Shammai and Hillel.
Yeah.
Don't know much about them, except that we usually go by the rulings of Hillel. Why do we never go by the rulings of Shammai?
Good question. We have 6 instances where the halacha rules like Shammai. So why? I don't have a good, bite-sized answer for why. There are interesting ramifications. I do recall one thing which kind of helps us to understand it a little bit, not completely, but a little bit. So there's only a few arguments that we see in the Talmud between Hillel and Shammai. Most of the arguments that we see are Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, the students of Hillel and Shammai. If you look at the core arguments that we are exposed to in the Talmud, there's only a small number, there's only a few. And they seem to share a pattern of Shammai having an opinion, or the essence of his opinion is very lofty, very spiritual, whereas Hillel's core opinions, essential opinions, are more rooted in the physical world and more rooted in pragmatism and more rooted in things in a manifested state. So I can think of 2 examples which stick in my mind. One is the disagreement, the argument about whether to light Hanukkah candles day 1 to day 8, right? So on day 1 you light 1, day 2, day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or to start the other way around, to start with 8 candles and then diminish as you go through it. So Shammai say you start with 8 and you go down to 1, and Hillel say you start with 1 and you go up to 8. And what do we do on Hanukkah? We do 1 to 8. We do it like Hillel. So over there, it's because, again, I don't have the right wording necessarily, but Shammai take this kind of like spiritual actualized reality, and that's their starting point. And Hillel comes from a point of potential leading through to things being manifest and growing. So that's one example. Another example is Shammai say that the new year for the trees should be on the 1st of Shavat, and Hillel say the new year for the trees should be on the 15th of Shavat. And what do we do? 15th of Shavat, Tu B'Shvat is the new year for the trees. So Shammai's reasoning is that the sap is already in the trees on the first day of Shavat, and that's why you have to, it's already actualized, even if it's can't be seen. So they say the 1st of Shavat, and Beit Shammai and Hillel say that we have to wait until the sap is actually coming out. It's actually manifest. It's actually in reality. So what I'm saying probably sounds very confusing, but it's something to do with that. It's something to do with the essential perspective of Shammai's opinions and the essential perspective of Hillel's opinions, and Hillel's are more rooted in the physical world. Pardon me?
Did the Sanhedrin then rule on which decision to take, or was their decision final?
Would it have been the Sanhedrin? I mean, there's the Sanhedrin, and then there's the Chachamim. There's the who will have ruled. I mean, it would have gone by a majority decision that we go by Hillel.
Yeah.
But is it a Sanhedrin? I guess it might be a Sanhedrin. I don't know.
The Talmud I once had, which unfortunately when I moved, I gave to somebody else, which I shouldn't have done. The light-coloured stoneholds, he only did about 12 volumes, and then I don't know what happened. They stopped. It was brilliant. Had the traditional one side, modern interpretation the other, And at the bottom, it always said, and the majority was, and that's the halacha.
Mm.
So it went by the majority of people who accepted it.
But were there two cousins, Hillel and Shimon?
No,
No.
no, I don't believe so.
They were just
Two.
scholars, or
That's right. That's right.
From the same-
Very highly regarded.
Yeah.
You know, they were the leaders of the
In
general.
general terms, don't they say Hillel was more lenient than Shammai.
Of yeah,
In general terms, the school of Hillel
that's right.
was more realistic.
And maybe that's another part to it as well. Maybe that's
And
why.
Shammai were all very strict, and
Yeah.
it was more pragmatic to accept a slightly less strict because then more people observe it.
Maybe that's also the root of it. Thank you. Right, 12:21. Let's move on to Pirkei Avot, shall we? Let's get the slide up on the thing. Same Mishnah, just moving through very slowly. So let's see where we're up to.
what page are we on?
Same page as every other week,
Oh,
Rita.
no, that's
568. 500, yeah.
yeah.
So let's try and think about where we're up to. So last week we did thinking deliberately as one studies. We talked about asking and responding, the ability to say I don't know. Oh, we even talked about Hillel. 569. Sorry, 569. We even talked about Hillel last week, having patience with questions, and the story of Hillel on Friday afternoon, trying to have his shower, constantly getting disturbed. Do we remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we've had listening and adding to the discussion. One who learns in order to teach. I'm not sure if we did that. I think that's where we're up to. Halomed al manas lelamed. One who learns in order to teach. This is all part of us becoming wholesome individuals to be able to absorb and appreciate the words of Torah. So in the English, in the Siddur, it's going to be learning in order to teach. There you go. Exactly that. So why is that an important goal? Essentially, one of the reasons is because anything that is dear to you and anything that is important to you, you want to be able to share it with others. When we are passionate about something, when we love something, when we appreciate something, so we want other people to enjoy that as well. And so if we are passionate about what we learn and we are passionate about Judaism and Jewish practice and Jewish tradition, then we should want that to permeate from us and want that to be something that we share with other people. That's one reason. Another reason, Rav Soloveitchik says that you're never really going to understand what you have learned until you are able to communicate it to other people, which is also interesting. You know, when things exist solely in our minds, we think we might know so much, but actually I find this the whole time, but actually when you're challenged on it, you realize how much you actually know, or at least how much you are not able to articulate what you know. So there's an extremely important level of development to one's accumulation of knowledge if they are then able to explain it and share it. I remember when I lived in South Manchester, there was one of the teenagers who went to, unusually for Hale, went to a very religious high school. And I said to him, I was like, listen, you're going to be learning Gemara, and you're going to be learning the Talmud, and they'll talk in the way that they talk with all of the Yiddish words and all of the yeshivish phrases. I said, you'll know when you really understand what you're learning if you're able to actually translate the words in English, not just into a yeshivish quasi half translation, but if you're actually able to form complete English sentences to explain the content that you have learned. So I think that's an important milestone to reach, an important goal to have in mind, is to be able not only to learn, but also to be able to explain what you have learned and to teach others, because you want them to be able to enjoy that as well. When I was in Hale as well, the education rabbi had this aspiration that he kept drilling into other people. If you know an aleph, teach an aleph. If you know a base, teach a base. You are always able to help somebody else with their own progress, with their own journey. So whatever you know, to be able to teach that to someone else, even if it's just teaching them how to read, there's so much value and there's so much importance to be able to do that. We don't realize how capable we all are. I feel like sometimes that impedes our progress as a community, not just here, but across Anglo Jewry, which is that we look to the rabbis, and we look to the teachers, we look to the educators, and we think like, I can't help, I can't be of any help. But actually, we could all radiate an influence on people around us, just to help them along with in whatever way we can. But we think that we're not capable. We think, oh, I'm not clever enough. I'm not capable enough. We're okay if we've learned something, then we're able to share that with others. So I see in this something that's incredibly empowering for each and every single one of us, because we might not think that we have all of the qualifications. We might not think we have all of the expertise. We might not think we've got all of the wisdom and all of the knowledge. But actually, we will all have something that can be available to inspire others. Yeah.
When I was tutoring, I had this parents' evening, and I always used to say to the parents, every child is good at something. And it's true, isn't it? They're good at something, whatever, even if they were not the cleverest, but they're good at something.
Yeah.
They're good with their hands, or they're good with something. That's why I used to say to the parents.
That's why curriculums are so hard, because we pigeonhole everyone into one
thing,
one curriculum. But actually, I mean, we couldn't get through a week at home of homework were it not for the fact that my eldest too will help the younger child with her spellings, or just check her maths. They're not teachers, they're not degree holders, they're not university educated, but they can spell, and that's already something then that they can help the little one with. So that's all of that makes the world go round. We say, by the way, in every Shacharit service, just before the Shema, there's a prayer called Ahava Rabbah. You have loved us with great love. It's on page 67 in the Green Siddur. You have loved us with great love, Lord our God, and with surpassing compassion have you had compassion on us. Our Father, our King, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you, and to whom you taught the laws of life, be gracious also to us and teach us. And then we say, Avinu ha'ava rachaman, our Father, the compassionate Father, ever compassionate, Rachim aleinu, have compassion on us. And then we say, V'ten b'libeinu lahavinu lahaskil, instill in our hearts the desire to understand and discern, lishmoa, to listen, and then we say lilmod ululamed, to learn and to teach, lishmoa v'lasot, to observe and to perform, la'asot l'kayem et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha bi'ahava, and to fulfill all the teachings of your Torah in love. So every morning we say this prayer, which if someone didn't say the blessings on learning Torah in the morning, they would be covered by this bracha over here, right? We say every morning that I want to be able not only to learn, but I want to teach as well. This is a prime value. This is a premium value that we place on Jewish education, and by extension any education. But it's clearly a Jewish value that we pray for every day. Not only that we should want to learn for ourselves, but that we also want to radiate and influence to others as well. So that's that one. Any comments or questions on that one before moving along? Nope. Oh, that's a pity, Gary. So the next one then is halomed al manat la'asot. So we've had halomed al manat lelamed, learning in order to teach on the condition that we're going to teach. And now we have learning in order to practice. So one angle was learning in order to teach, and this one is learning in order to practice, which in some ways you'd have thought that could have been a bit higher up the list. You'd think that in some ways that's probably...
Once you know, you can do the job. Once you've learned,
Yeah.
once you've been trained, you can do the job.
That's
what
right.
it means.
In many ways, yeah. That's certainly an intuitive understanding. What I've seen here as well is that Judaism is not a spectator sport. I can't remember who it was that said that to me the first time, but I love that phrase. Judaism is not a spectator sport. And unfortunately, we often find that people will just kind of sit in an environment and just absorb, which is great. But, I'll give one example. It's very lonely when you're standing up to lead a davening and you're the only one singing. You've got a whole audience there, so to speak, but people aren't joining in. And that's what I always associate in my mind with Judaism not being a spectator sport. It's like, a shul service is not a performance. We're all supposed to be going for it together. But by extension, it's one thing to learn about things, but part of the growth of an individual is to put it into practice as well. And to make it meaningful and to make it consistent, and that all brings a certain element of completion to everything that we study, to everything that we explore. We've sat here for a good few years now exploring all of the different ethical values that we should try and live by. And there have been occasions where things have spoken to us, and then we've said, like, this is something that I would actually like to make sure that I pay more attention to. And that's the desired outcome of this kind of growth, of this kind of study. I remember, Martin, you've often referred back to the short Devar Torah that I gave, where we talked about blessing people. And like, just to say good morning is a blessing. Just to wish someone a good day is a blessing. And and it resonated with me as much as it seemed to resonate with you. And there are things that we pick up on. There's things that we remember, and we put it into practice because it's an important thing. So that all helps us build and grow and become more like David Salter. Yes, David.
It's interesting when you say Judaism is not a spectator sport. There are very strict rules about what you can say when you're in the presence of a teacher who's teaching you. It's very strict rules where you should know to keep your mouth shut and not to say anything and not to interrupt. Because probably you don't know better in the first place, most likely. And secondly, it's disrespectful. Thirdly, you interrupt the flow and concentration of the person that's trying to teach you. So when we say it's not a spectator sport, there are balances within that.
Yes, there's always balances.
When we're listening to somebody with greater knowledge than us.
I was thinking more along the lines of, it's one thing to come along to a Torah class and learn about a lulav and etrog, but when Sukkot comes about, try and get hold of a lulav and etrog so you can do the mitzvah. We could sit there, we could have learned so much about lulav and etrog, we could taught people so much about lulav and etrog, and then Sukkot just passes us by, and you've missed an opportunity to put into practice what you knew. That was more what I meant by a spectator sport. There's so much in the terms of the topics of Judaism that one can learn about that we then put into practice. I remember distinctly. It's very embarrassing for me to share this, but I should feel more proud about how far I have come than about what I was like. But this is going on YouTube now, so it's there for millions of people. 2017 is when Shira and I joined the Bushy community. It's not the first time that I was part of the education team at Bushy Synagogue. You see, when I was in sixth form, back in 2002, 2003, I was a cheder teacher here.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
Here. In the days of Rabbi Bloom. Right? You remember Rabbi Bloom. So don't tell him this bit. But, I was a sixth former who, I guess, I knew an Aleph, so I could teach an Aleph. That was pretty much the extent of my my abilities. But they were short on teachers. There were two girls at my school who were teaching here, and they said, "Oh, why don't you come along and fill the slot?" So I came along. But, I wasn't as rounded, certainly in this sense, but I wasn't as rounded an individual as I was then. I remember that I wasn't a regular sit wearer, but I would come every Sunday morning and I would expect the students to make the bracha on their sit. And if they weren't wearing their sit, I would have to say to them, please make sure you're wearing your sit next week. And I remember there was one week where we were doing davening at the start of the class, and we got to the bracha of sit, and one of the cheeky monkeys said, "Mr. Kerr, where are your sit?" And I kind of gave this answer of like, do as I say, don't do as I do type thing. So this resonates with me. Halomed al menat la'asot. If you want, first of all, we've talked about this in the past. If you want something to be absorbed by someone else, it has to mean something to you. Devarim hayotzim min halev nichnas el halev. The things that come from our heart will enter into the hearts of others. People can see through insincerity. People can see through hypocrisy. People can see through fakeness. So there has to be a level of consistency in what we're learning, what we're teaching, and what we're doing. It all has to be one thing if we want it to then be transmissible and meaningful to others. So
I remember, it's not similar to yours, but I was in Paris and I went to the only Ashkenazi shul in Paris, little Stiefel, lovely shul, and the rabbi was of the old school. He really was tough and he got up to give the drosh. That's all he did, because all the people that were able to do it, and he gave the drosh in French. And he was so passionate that I didn't understand one word, but it moved me. I was sitting there absolutely
mesmerized
by the passion. You could see the tears. He was so able to believe and convey that. It was beautiful. I didn't, not one word, but I went out feeling.
Uplifted.
I don't know about you, but I think this was the Shabbaton choir. It makes me.
Dad, listening?
Yeah,
my dad's the chairman.
Choir, it makes me. No, it goes to my kishkas. It just goes to, I don't know, I don't know, it's just something there which really makes me maybe cry sometimes, maybe as well. I don't know, but I just love them.
There you go, Dad. That's as good a praise as you're going to get today.
Your dad's a member of the Shabbat.
He's the chairman of the Shabbat.
I didn't know that until I went. There was a short film made in honor of Jonathan Sachs, and they invited some friends to become members of the crowd for the sake of the film, and I was one of the members.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking at your dad, and I thought, is it him? Is it?
So he's just posted.
Was he there yesterday?
He's just posted the link. I'll send it on in a minute. The link to the Ukrainian concert that they did the other day.
Was he there yesterday?
It was a couple of days ago. Yeah.
A couple of days ago.
Monday night in Hampstead. You can watch it back.
Do you remember the film?
I love
Made-
them. I'm talking to your dad. I love them.
1 second, let's.
Is the boy still there, the young lad? Is he still there, this young
Has
lad?
that changed?
I don't know.
A couple of years.
Yeah, they have to change, isn't it? Because their voice gets. Is the young lad still there? Rabbi Cat. No, not Rabbi Cat. Your
It's
Rabbi.
on mute.
You need to unmute yourself, Dad.
Is he muted?
He's muted.
Sorry, what was the question?
Right, is the young lad who was singing, is he still there?
Yeah,
Yeah?
What's the younger?
and if you look at the recording of Monday, you'll see we have another young lad.
Yeah.
And we had a children's choir from 3 schools joining us as well.
It was interesting, the Jewish news, yeah.
Anyway, this is not my PR moment. So,
To the
back
millions,
to
what?
Rabbi Nick.
To the millions watching on YouTube, you can check out the recording of Monday night's concert in honor of Ukraine relief. So there you go. And David, you were saying something else?
I was asking him, is he still there?
Yeah, he's still there. He's just hiding.
Can he hear us?
Yeah.
If he remembers that the film made in the shul with in honor of Jonathan, former chief rabbi. Do you remember with the pop singer there? Do you remember that evening in the shul?
I do. We recorded that for the Genesis Prize people who were doing a posthumous dinner in recognition of Rabbi Sachs.
Yeah.
And that was probably his favorite Leonard Cohen song,
That's right.
called You Want It Darker.
It was a wonderful evening, actually. Yeah.
You were there.
I was there in the shul. I was part of the crowd.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it was edited down into a very nice component that they used within a dinner a few weeks later.
I still remember the 100-odd takes they had to do on every single word.
Now you know what it's like to be on TV.
Cheers.
There we
I can
go.
assure you, those who joined the concert and want the link for the concert, it was all one take.
There you go.
Yes.
Especially the impromptu
They didn't do
wedding
it.
ceremony
Did
with
they do
Cousin
this?
Albi and Cousin Turgle.
Going back on yesterday or 2 days ago, did they do it on Zoom?
Well, there's a recording. I'll send it to you now.
Oh,
after
you'll
the-
send it
yeah.
to me because I love it.
We did it on Zoom and people were able to buy tickets online to watch it live, mainly from Israel, I hasten to add, a few from Leeds.
Yeah.
Jonathan Turgle was Johnny Turgle was wonderful that evening. Actually, he was brilliant.
Oh, he's always on top
Very
form.
inspirational.
He might be watching this. He might be one of the million tuning in. Who knows?
Did you go, David?
Yeah, I was there when they made the film. I was one of the crowd. They needed a crowd to star as part of the audience.
Right.
Oh, right. Okay.
He was there going, woo! All right, let's go. A couple more things.
Rabbi, could you send me the link?
Yeah, I'll do that in a few
Thank
minutes.
you.
So, next one. 48 on my list, but it can't be 48
Oh,
because
I
that
like
will mean...
the next one.
Oh, yes.
I like it.
Hamachakim et Rabo.
Making the teacher wiser.
That's right. That's right. Making the teacher wiser. Is
Yes,
it possible? I
My
assure you
dad,
it's possible.
God rest his soul, used to tell me, you can still learn from your children.
Mm-hmm. That's very good.
Looking for my late dad.
There's a famous phrase, a famous statement in the Talmud. I think it's in Talmud, which says, I learned from a lot of people, but the people that I learned from the most were my students. Something like that. But herein, and we'll try and speed up a little bit just to try and get through these last few, so that we can finish the whole thing. So there's an importance to critique. There's an importance to debate, because when you challenge and when you debate and you discuss the things that you learn, so everybody benefits. It sharpens the teacher's mind, and it's an important part of learning. It's an important part of developing ourselves and building ourselves, is to be able to engage in that way. And the goal of healthy debate is not personal triumph. It's not that I want to try and prove someone wrong and It's not an ego trip. Healthy debate is about a joint effort to arrive at the truth. So it's all very important. There's one other point. I can't remember if I arrived at this myself or if I saw this in something that I was reading, but hamachakim et rabo could also mean that you actively treat your teacher as if they are wiser than you. And that's also something which isn't, always intuitive. Sometimes we can not ridicule, but we can be dismissive of teachers as being people who are wiser. Sometimes it comes intuitively, and sometimes it doesn't. To have an awe and reverence for a teacher because you see them as someone who knows more than you doesn't always come instinctively to people. But that could also be one of the ways in which we read that phrase, hamachakim et rabo, might mean not only that I make them wiser by engaging and debating and discussing, but I might make them wiser in my own mind and just realize that these are people who I should give my attention to, give my respect to, and prepare myself to absorb what they have to offer.
Well, by asking a question. By asking a question,
Yes.
the rabbi, the teacher, Moreno, might not know the answer, but he or she will then go and...
That's right. And then they have to look it up,
Yeah.
and then they become more wiser. Yeah.
So I assume it means participate. If you participate in a learning session, the possibility is that not only will you learn, but your teacher will
That's
learn
right.
something.
But I'd say it is a novel idea for a lot of people that should be something that is not about pitching you against another person or trying to show off your knowledge. And it should be an equal.
We don't really, because when we call the teacher up, we say Moreno, Rabbi, Moreno, whatever.
Yeah,
We have a respect for the teacher.
maybe in that context, but in other classrooms, you might not get that same decorum. All right, I've got two more guys, and 12 more minutes to go. Hamachon. Where is it? Hamachavein. Thank you. Hamachavein. What's that one?
Being precise. If you go to the next one, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, being precise in one's studies.
Hamachavein et shmuato. So the Green Siddur translates as being precise in one's studies. The screen says who is exact in what he has learned, and my notes says one who ponders over what he has learned. So there's probably a few different ways of looking at this, but some of the nuggets of wisdom that I see is the importance of taking care to understand, to see the things that we learn not just in isolation, but as a composite picture of a whole topic, of a whole area of knowledge. When we learn Torah texts, so we have to try and maintain a balance and perspective with other things that we have exposed ourselves to, and not just to see everything in isolation. And that's why when we will discuss, one of you will put up your hand and say, but didn't we learn something else where we said something completely different? And that's exactly what the Talmud does as well. The Talmud has a statement, and then a rabbi pipes up and says, hang on a minute, you taught me something else last week. So that is all part of being precise, being exact, and really trying to dig deep into making sure we understand things properly. And yeah, those are the main things I would say I have to say, but I welcome any other comments and feedback and questions. Or we go into the last one. Are you ready for this, Peter?
Yeah, that's
This is a big moment here. So number 48, even though it's number 50 on my notes, it's number 48 because we were told there are 48 paths, 48 attainments, 48 virtues. So the last one is Ha'omer Davar B'Shem Omro, that we should be trying to say things in the name of the person who said it, the person who taught it, giving credit where credit is due, not passing off, not plagiarizing and passing off our knowledge and our intellect as our own. So clearly an important virtue in becoming a wholesome Jew, and it's clearly an important value because if
You see, in the name of it, that means God.
no, well it might be, but it says reporting a saying in the name of the one who said it. So if I tell a story about Rabbi Koppel Rosen, right, from Carmel College, and I try and pass that off as my own experience instead of quoting Martin, who is my go-to source for stories about Rabbi Koppel Rosen, right? So if I've learned something from someone else, I should report, I should pass that on in the name of the person who told me it.
Oh, I see.
This doesn't seem to be a particularly good example of that.
Which one? Koppel Rosen?
No. Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai.
Ooh, isn't it? Isn't it a good example? So let's just take a look at the rest of this Mishnah. I forgot there's more. So the rest of the Mishnah says, after we have that one, Kol ha'omer. Sorry. So let's just do this carefully. So the final one is V'ha'omer davar b'shem omro, right? It's telling something, reporting something in the name of the person who said it, and then the Mishnah finishes off. Halamadata, we've learned Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro mevi geula le'olam. A person who tells something, who reports a saying in the name of the one who said it, brings redemption, brings deliverance, brings salvation to the world. Shne'emar, and it gives you a verse. Vatomer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordechai, a verse from the Megillah, from Megillat Esther, that when she went to say something to Achashverosh, she said it in Mordechai's name. So David is challenging that and saying, it's not a very good example. We're saying it brings redemption, it brings salvation to the world. So we have to explore this. I've got this in my notes. So I'm pleased that you've asked this question. Pardon?
She would have got tremendous benefit by pretending she found out.
Right.
But she didn't. She said it wasn't me.
So let's just get some context going. So let's just get some context.
He got the benefit, not her.
So let's just get some context over here. This verse was Esther saying to Achashverosh, did you know that there are these two guys who work in your palace who are conspiring to kill you? Bigtan and Teresh were conspiring to kill Achashverosh. Mordechai overheard the plot to assassinate him, and he told Esther, and Esther told Achashverosh. And this verse then is the moment at which Esther gave credit where credit was due. She told Achashverosh, I heard this from Mordechai, and what happened as a result of that was the plan was foiled. Bigtan and Teresh were killed, and Achashverosh wrote it down in his book of Chronicles. And then when we fast forward through the story, Haman has risen to power. Haman has sentenced the Jews to death. Everyone is going crazy. Mordechai is fasting. Esther fasts for 3 days. All of the things that happen, the plan, the story that develops from that point reaches a crescendo, reaches a climax when Achashverosh can't sleep. And he can't sleep that night. Haman is building gallows in the courtyard. Achashverosh can't sleep. He asks for his book of Chronicles. He goes through it, and look, I never rewarded Mordechai for saving my life. And as a result of that, the story starts to reach its crescendo. As a result of that, Mordechai gets honored, Haman gets disgraced, he comes that night to the party, he embarrasses himself, and the plan gets exposed, and off with Haman's head, or not, he gets hanged, but Mordechai is saved, the Jewish people are saved. So the moment that led to the Jewish people's salvation was the moment when Esther gave credit to Mordechai, because without that, Mordechai wouldn't have got written down. And then the night when Achashverosh couldn't sleep, he wouldn't have seen this point about Mordechai. Or maybe he wouldn't have had that sleepless night at all. But that was the turning point when which led to the salvation of the Jewish people. And it was all because Esther said something in Mordechai's name. Well, David was challenging it, but I'm interested to know what he thinks now.
I think that doesn't refer to the incident you're talking about. I think that refers to the incident when Esther was hesitant to approach Ahasuerus with the knowledge that a decree had come to destroy all the Jews.
Well, there's an easy way to find out. We look up the verse.
And there was a discussion between Mordecai and Esther at the time. And Mordecai said to Esther, if you don't go,
then salvation will come from somewhere else.
From somewhere else.
So the only way to prove me wrong is to go and open it up. No, but I'm saying if you open it up, that's where the verse is.
That's what came to my mind.
Yeah.
In this instance, and not in the earlier instance. That's why I challenged.
That's why we need context.
My explanation is exactly that she could have alerted the king without saying who was the source of the information. And that's why that example was given. She honoured Mordecai.
But because she honoured Mordecai, all of that.
The Jewish people were saved.
That's right. Now, the Talmud, in so many places.
It wasn't because she honored Mordecai at that stage, the Jewish people were saved. The Jewish people were only saved when she approached the king and told him of the plot to destroy the Jewish people. She had 2 feasts. At that stage, that was the turning point. She had two
feasts, and you're right. In the second feast, she plucks up the courage to tell Achashverosh but it was all.
And they may have been connected.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It's all part of. It all starts with. Well, it's difficult to say. It all starts, but that was a huge turning point. The night when he couldn't sleep. That was.
Usually, this means when I say something about, I know something about Torah, and I don't quote my source, the rabbi I learned it from. I don't give him the kavod and pretending it's from me. Is really the essence of what this means.
That's one of the that's one of it. When we have throughout the Talmud, you can sometimes have like 8 lines, which is just Amar of this rabbi, Amar of this rabbi, Amar of this rabbi, and it traces back all of the rabbis who had told this one and told this one, who told this one, who told this one, who told this one. But that happens loads and loads of times in the Talmud. All the time, but sometimes it's really long.
And I felt that would be
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Yeah, okay. And yet it's a source from the Bible that we get. So, which literally brought Geula to the Jewish people. So yeah.
Did you say these were the 48? No? So we finished.
That was it. That was our last one of the 48.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, we've still got a few more Mishnayot to finish the whole book, but that was we've been talking for like 10 weeks now, or more maybe, about the 48 paths to wisdom, 48 ways to become a wholesome human being. So you're going to have to go review all of those, Rita. I'm going to test you next week. I'm going to ask you what number 37 is, what number 23. You better be able to tell me.
Another phrase, but I don't know where it came from. It certainly jumped from me. That some great person once said to his students, I don't mind you saying what I've said as though you said it. What I don't want to hear is something you said as though I said it.
Yeah. So
I always say this, and I repeat it every time I come here. These laws have been written so many years ago. It just sometimes amazes me.
Yeah.
because they're such old things, you know. Irrelevant, some of it.
You'd be a saint if you could live by them all, but we try hard.
There was
Just shows you, Peter, that Torah was true then, as it is true now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's timeless.
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
And that's all we got time for. To the millions watching on YouTube, join us for the after party here in Shore. But for now, we wish you a wonderful and meaningful afternoon.